Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris. I'm a veteran with a disability rating. I'm a former veteran service officer and a current VA claims rater. I want to talk today about VA supplemental claims. We're going to start with some resources. First, we've got the Code of Federal Regulations. You don't really need to know this, but if you're interested in where um, supplemental appeals have their basis in the law, it's 38 CFR 3.2501. This basically says under what circumstances you can use this. Explains the difference between new and relevant evidence and defines them. Talks about the VA's requirement to assist you with gathering records and discussion of filing dates. I'm going to be talking through the specific form 20995. I have one filled out already that I'm going to use if you're ever looking to find how to use those. You go to VA Forms. There's a site on the VA webpage, VA Forms, va.gov/forms, and you can type any keyword in here to get the type of form. We'll be using supplemental claims, and you can fill that out online if you've got a va.gov account, or you can download the form and fill it out. I'll also be using these two references from the M21 manual from part 2. This is the main section on what a supplemental claim is, and also I'll be using part 10, which is based on revisions. It includes a section on supplemental claims as well. First, let's talk about what a supplemental claim is and isn't. It's a new review of an issue that's been previously decided and based and required to have new and relevant evidence. So you can file these at any time after the decision's been filed. If you file within 1 year, or you at least file an intent to file within that 1 year from the previous decision, you preserve an effective date potential. But if you have not done that and you waited, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 years, you can still file this. All that's required is new and relevant evidence, and we'll get into how the VA defines those and some tips for that in a moment. Let's also ask what a supplemental claim is not. It's not a request for increase. So, for instance, I see this happen a lot when people are filing for a condition that's become worsened. Sometimes they file it on this form as if it's an appeal that needs to be granted, and that's an easy way just to get a confirm and continue of your previous decision. So if you're filing for a worsening condition, you need to use that 21526 EZ form. So we don't typically treat a supplemental claim like a claim for increase, although that does happen from time to time under different circumstances. But generally, if you're filing for a supplemental claim, you want a different decision than what the VA gave you. And you're going to give some new and relevant evidence to the VA to ask them to reconsider that previous decision that you didn't agree with. Well, let's talk for a minute about VA language. That's generally the same or similar benefit. This nonsense language, it just means, look, if we previously decided something, it's eligible for a supplemental claim using the 0995 form. If we've never decided a claim for that contention or anything similar to it, you would file that on a regular EZ 526 form as if you're filing for a new claim. So the supplemental claim is basically an appeal. And it requires new and relevant evidence. And they give you some examples in the M21 under what circumstances you can use it. We'll just be using the most general. For instance, you had a denial for knee right arthritis, and you want to file for an appeal on that because you think that you should have received. Let's talk over one of the most important elements of this type of appeal for a supplemental claim, and that's the requirement for new and relevant evidence. I've seen a lot of veterans get this wrong. They think that if they just give potentially new evidence, that that's going to be sufficient. Honestly, if you're just giving a lay statement to say, hey, this still hurts and I don't agree with your decision, that may be new evidence, but it's not going to meet the definition of relevant. I've denied a lot of claims as a claims rater where they had new medical records, or they were giving me another statement, maybe from family members, to show as a basis for the new evidence. And it's a very low threshold to get this in front of a rater. VSRs really should not even, when they're vetting these, shouldn't even be, they're not making decisions at all on whether it's really duplicative, I can't say that word, information, whether it's a duplicate type of evidence. If you see here, there's no need for the VSR really to be determining whether or not it's the same evidence previously given or whether it's relevant. Now, our VSR is the claims rater, which is what I was. That's their decision. So when it comes to me, it's already they've already determined, they gave some reason to say that there's new and relevant evidence. If you just file an 0995 and give zero new evidence at all, well, that's probably going to not be a complete claim, and you may get a phone call or your POA that you need to submit something with that. So once it's considered substantially complete, and that's just a decision made by the development team, it comes to a rater for rating, and it needs to meet this threshold. When we're looking at your evidence, we're determining, okay, is this new evidence? This is when we're really determining, oh, that's the same exact evidence the veteran used last time as the basis for this, and that's not persuasive. The more important issue outside of new, and new can easily be meet the threshold by just giving new medical records, showing a condition and showing how it's progressed over the years. It's the what is a relevant? What's the definition of relevant? For that, let's go over here to Part 10 in the M21. Okay, new evidence is just basically we've discussed that it affirms findings previously deemed favorable. We're talking about what an example of relevant evidence. Relevant evidence is information that tends to prove or disprove a matter. Okay, new evidence is evidence not previously a part of the record before the adjudicators, and relevant is information that will prove or disprove a matter. Well, you say, well, how do I know what will prove or disprove? That's why I'm filing this claim. Well, for instance, let's say you filed it on a direct basis, but now you think you might be eligible for service connection on the basis of a secondary. Well, that's a new theory of entitlement that you're raising. That was not previously addressed. That is relevant. For instance, if you got a condition like, let's say you had pain going down your left leg and you tried to file it on a direct basis based on a leg injury in service, but it was so many years ago, there really was no basis for that. And they're like, actually, that's radiculopathy. And you notice that you have a low back condition, service connected. Well, in most cases, I would just say file for an increase for back so that radiculopathy can be automatically inferred. But in this case, maybe you're going to just put in for radiculopathy and say it's secondary to the low back. I always tell veterans, be careful when you're trying to connect things secondary to a condition that's already been rated, because often we will rate again that primary condition. And if it's been less than 5 years, you very well could get a reduction, even though you would get, let's say, the right leg pain radiculopathy at 10% for pain. Your low back condition might actually have improved. So always be smart when you're filing for something secondary to a service-connected condition, because we will, again, generally, if it's an inferred type of issue like radiculopathy and back, be looking again with an exam with results from that DBQ to see if that condition has worsened or has gotten better. So just a little hint there. But so that's new and relevant. What I want to do now is I want to pull up an 0995 and show you some of the way I've already filled out some of this just to kind of help us along. So let's say that you want to fill this out. For my purposes, this is a compensation claim that we're asking. Maybe you've been denied a condition and you want to file for service connection again. You wouldn't need to check any of these other boxes. We're just going to discuss compensation would be checked. Then you'd put your name and information here as normal. You notice here it's Nick Saban Jr. Here's his date of birth. All you need is your social. Even you older vets don't really need to put your service number. We pretty much have recategorized everything under social, but if you know your service number, you can put it in there. Here's the address in Tuscaloosa with a phone number and an email. That's all optional on the email, as you can see. I do recommend you use a phone number in case someone needs to reach out to you. You'd only fill out this middle section of someone other than the veterans being filed for, so we'll skip that. Under risk of homelessness, only check these if they really apply to you and they're self-explanatory. In this case, it's no. Now, under issues for supplemental claim, these are the date of your prior denials that you're appealing. And you'll notice that I'm giving you 6 different examples of what you might appeal for. For instance, there was a change of law in May of 2024, I believe, in which GERD and IBS could be separated. Formerly, I believe it was hiatal hernia, and it would had to be combined, but now these conditions can be separated. So let's say I want that reevaluated, but I think I had my condition rating for more than 5 years, or there's a low risk of me getting reduced. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get an extra 10%, let's say, out of that. And then let's say disagree with the previous decision of only getting 0% hypertension because they didn't see that your records show that you had continuous medication. So a 10% should have been merited. Instead, you got a 0%. And I don't really know if that's the case. Off the top of my head, it might actually be 0% even with continuous. I'd have to look that up again. But let's say you have a previous denial for CAD, but you tried to connect it on a direct basis, but now you've got a new theory of entitlement. Your new and relevant evidence is that CAD is secondary to your service-connected hypertension. That's an example of that as new and relevant. How about how TDIU has not been reasonably raised by your previous decision, even though you're not working and your service connection conditions both meet the scheduler for defining of TDIU and the primary cause behind why you're not working. And if you didn't send with that, like an 8940 and other forms, they'll ask for that. Or maybe you disagree with a previous decision that you have for a denial, but now you can show you have a presumptive basis for that decision. Or in the case of, let's say, a condition where you now want to show that TARA should be considered, it was denied, let's say, on a secondary, on a direct basis, but now you've got TARA to possibly show a connection, so you can have that reevaluated. So there's just some examples of what new and relevant evidence would be. And for any one of these, I would never just submit this as the basis. I would give a full 4138, which is a statement form, which would fully lay out my symptomology, fully lay out my theory, why I want it considered. That just helps the reviewer to have an idea of what you're going for and why you're going for it. Usually, if you have a private attorney, they did like a 5-page document on each. It was a little overkill, but we get the point. You can do it in 1 page or 2 pages. Your new and relevant evidence, you could say, hey, I have VAMC records. You would list them here. If you don't have the date, they'll go all the way back to what you have. Also, I'm going to talk about this 5103 notice. It's very important that you check this box. You need to check yes, because if you don't, it slows the claim down if you haven't had a previous decision within a year. Now, in this case, I showed that we did have a previous decision within a year, so this is less relevant. But always check this yes to say you've reviewed the notice of what evidence is required, and yes, consent to the VBA being notified about certain things. I don't ever really recommend hitting I do not consent, I revoke consent. That's just going to, in my opinion, mess up your claim. Or go to, there may be very specific reasons related to MST that were outside of my purview as a rater that may be important. But for the most part, there's no reason to restrict the VBA from notifying VHA about certain events, okay? In this case, I always recommend that you sign. Even if you have a POA work with you and they say, hey, I can fill this out, ask for them to send you the signature form so you can sign it. Because what happens is when we get these just signed by a POA, I've made decisions and overlooked the fact that a POA signed, but not the veteran. And in cases like that, where there was no prior decision within the previous year, Post will send it back. The whole decision needs to be deleted from the folder. It gets booted out for another 30 days for the 5103 notice to go out. Who knows if the next rater will even make the same decision? So always check this box. Always sign this. So I think that pretty much covers the basis of new and relevant evidence, and I've gone over the form. We've talked about how it's your best bet on these supplemental claims is new theories of entitlement. For instance, you flunked out on the direct. Let's try a secondary now. You bombed out on the secondary. Let's try a TARA now. And let's have some good evidence to kind of tie it to. The worst thing you can do is just send one of these forms in and just say, I disagree with the previous decision. And you've given no new evidence, no relevant evidence. It's a quick, immediate denial when it gets sent to the rater, and usually you'll get a denial within 30 to 45 days if you do that. So you want to see the VA claim system work really quickly. file it with no new and relevant evidence. And also try, even if it's a duplicate type of information, maybe reword it in such a way that it doesn't read completely duplicative. So at least you're trying to hope that it can get in front of an examiner is what you're hoping. Because if it can get in front of another examiner who they can make a different medical decision. You might have had two separate denials, but now your new evidence might have convinced someone, because it's based on Terra, that it should be get a new medical opinion. Now, in cases where you've had the exact same evidence given and there's an opinion that's no, and there's another decision based on the same evidence and a yes, they may require a reconciliation opinion. So a third VA opinion may need to go out. But again, these are all just how you put your best foot forward when you file these supplemental claims. Okay, I hope that helped for now. Till next time, y'all take care.